Well, welcome John Bowles, pastor, Beggar's Table, and welcome everybody who's watching, all you who are at Beggars and Vox folks. I'm Rustin, I'm the pastor of Vox Day Community. That's where we are today, continuing our conversation about the Sermon on the Mount, central teaching of Jesus, and really the kind of the constitution of the early church and everything that we hope to be about. We have just finished up the first long section of the Sermon on the Mount called the Beatitudes. But I think what we're going to find now is that you don't really finish up the Beatitudes. They kind of are the framework for the rest of the sermon in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I think the rest of the sermon is a commentary on the Beatitudes, really.
Okay.
I mean, take it for what you will. That's what I think.
And I think especially where we left off in the last conversation was dealing with the reality that if you live into these Beatitudes kind of in a lived way, you're going to find yourself out of step with the culture around you, which can set the framework for persecution.
Right.
Whatever that means.
Which would be why Jesus ended with persecution. I mean, ended in quotes. It's not really ending.
Yeah.
The last quote-unquote beatitude that we hear is, blessed are the persecuted. Yeah.
So in some ways now he's going to go on, I think we're going to find, and he's going to give some real practical implications of like, here's what happens if you're going to live as persecuted people, living according to this different kingdom while still very much in the kingdom of the earth. You're going to have trouble, and I'm going to give you some examples about what that means. I'm going to tell you about the implications of that.
Yeah.
But before Jesus gets into real practical implications, he takes a step back, doesn't he?
He does.
He kind of has this parenthetical moment where he's addressing certainly a question that's probably coming up in the crowd about their relationship to the law.
Right. Which
comes out of kind of left field for us, because I don't think that probably comes into our mind, but in their mind, this looms large. Jesus is coming and he's turning everything upside down so far in the Beatitudes. And now he's going to address things that are actually written in the law. And so before he does that, he sort of gives people a framework by addressing what he's going to do to the law.
Yeah. It's like he caught their attention with the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
He set the cornerstone of the teaching right there in the Beatitudes. And it's like before he elaborates, before he goes on, he has to almost in some ways establish his authority, right? And like you said, it's strange to us that he does that by referring to the law.
Yeah.
But in kind of reassuring them, listen, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to abolish the law.
Which is what a good teacher does. I mean, he's preemptively, like he's anticipating the objection they're going to have, and he's dealing with that up front.
Anticipating their objection. This is what I try to do with my people all the time. Anticipate their objections. Yes, exactly. Right. But you know what? It sounds strange to us because we don't understand the role the law held, what the law was for those people. They're imagining. It would be like someone today that was totally rocking people's world and saying, and then stopping, and before they go on, saying, "Listen, don't think that I've come to do away with the Bible, right? I'm not here to negate the Bible. Everything that you believe is holy, I do too."
That's good because that was a question I had for you.
What was that?
Are you negating everything holy?
Yeah.
In what we're doing?
Exactly.
No, we're not doing that. We're actually.
Exactly.
Trying to do the opposite.
Exactly.
But I think this is worth talking about. What this relationship to the law. Because what comes into our imaginations, I think, might be different than what came into their imaginations.
With the law, yeah. And I think that's...
How do we get into that?
I think it's totally true, Rustin. I think that there's a gap, a felt gap here between what law meant for people, especially what it means for Jesus, and what it means for us today.
Yeah.
And I think the law is hard for us to talk about today because when we hear the word law, when we imagine law, we think, again, I've said this before and I'll continue to say it, we think dualistically. We've been shaped by our culture, which is a dualistic culture. And so when we think of law, we think of right, wrong. We think of either or, good, bad. And out
categorically in binary,
right? Perfect. We do that, and so it makes us take the words of Jesus, let alone the words of Paul later, and try to filter it through this binary way of thinking, and it doesn't. It just confuses us.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people walk away from Paul, especially going, I just don't understand. He seems to be all over the place, because
or I don't like Paul.
Yeah,
Like, there's a lot of that. Yeah, comes off as rather harsh, but I think that has to do more with us than him.
Probably, yeah. It's at the very least, it's the problem of trying to translate somebody else's culture through our culture.
Yeah.
And all of that to say, we need to take 2 steps back and talk about the law and what is really meant here, and maybe try to break our dualistic way of thinking. But Rustin, when you think of the law, first of all, let me ask you some questions. And I wrote these up just for you.
Great. Let me take a drink.
Yeah. I'll start you off with a very binary question.
Right.
Do you obey the law?
Oh, always.
Always? Okay.
No.
I don't believe that.
No, probably not.
Okay, so let's tease this out a little bit. When you break the law, what is the law that you break most often, you would say?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wow, there's so many.
You will not be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the safest thing to say would be, speed limits. Or I'm not a big speeder, but I don't exactly follow.
Yeah. I should be asking these questions of myself.
Yeah. What
because,
about you, John? What's the law you most often break?
To me, it's easy. It's stop signs and speed limits. And I am not like you. I speed all the time. And I get mad at people that drive the speed limit. Like, I think there's no reason for that. There's no... Isn't that awful? I know.
I can tell you why I don't speed more often. It's because I can't afford the tickets.
Yeah.
So-
Well, sure. And I can't either. That's why I keep a sharp eye out. There's a reason why we have the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer and a book by Jack Kerouac here called
table.
On the Road.
That's our friendship in
Yeah.
a nutshell there.
You move, man. The road doesn't move.
Yeah.
It's all about speeding. So
It is.
anyway, sorry about that tangent. But
Kerouac is not a tangent. That's important.
when you obey the law, Rustin, when you find yourself obeying the speed limit, stopping at stop signs, why do you do that?
Well, like I said, one, I don't want to pay fines.
Yeah, you already identified why you don't.
So yeah, I think. Well, I think I have I have a sense of high-minded morality. Like, I want to be right. I want to do things right, and I can tell that because I get mad when other people go speeding by me, and I'm like, where's a cop when you need one? That was you.
Yeah, no, I'm going to get us on such a tangent that we're never going to get this back in here, because I have the same sense of right and wrong, and I think that the speeding is right. But anyway, maybe a better example and a more timely example. This happened to me just last night. I was in the Crossroads at Beggar's Table, and I went to get a bite to eat. And I'm doing this all the time these days. I just drive up to somewhere, I get out of my car, and I walk to the door, and then I stop and remember, oh, wait a minute, I don't have my mask on. I brought a visual aid. This is my mask.
Hey. Love KC.
Vox Day just got their own masks,
Yeah, I should've
which
brought
is, we don't have it with us, but that's a pretty cool idea. But I remember that I have to go back and get this. And so I was thinking about our teaching yesterday when I did this, and I was like, oh yeah, this is, why am I putting the mask on when I go in these restaurants? And sure, some of it might be because we're supposed to. There's a law.
Yeah.
And
Currently required, right? In Kansas City.
right.
Yeah.
In some places, most places, I don't really know, but I think most places will make you go get a mask if you don't.
Okay.
Or they'll have a mask. But I recognized in my heart of hearts that wasn't really why I was doing it. And then I think, okay, well, it's medical. I mean, I have to wear the mask because I could infect somebody with coronavirus. But then I have to search my heart, and whether I'm right or wrong is not the issue. In my heart of hearts, if I'm being honest, I don't think I'm going to infect anyone. Now, again, I'm not holding that up as an example for people to live. I'm just saying, I really don't think I have the coronavirus, and I haven't felt the coronavirus personally, very close, and so I'm not going to give anyone the coronavirus. That'd be the easy thing to. But I realized though that I want to get my mask and put it on because I like being part of the community that's wearing masks. Now, some of that is because I grew up loving superheroes, and I feel like we're living in a time where everyone's become a superhero. It's like really...
That we have this power to actually save one another with.
It's really cool to walk around and see everyone wearing masks. Yeah. But again, I digress. I realized, though, that... let me put it this way. Carrie and I just got back from Alabama because her mother lives in Alabama. So for a variety of reasons, we went to Alabama to see her mother. And where she lives in Gulf Shores, Alabama, there's nobody wearing masks. Nobody wears masks. Yeah. And Carrie and I were always looked at funny for wearing masks. Mm-hmm. We'd go out to eat somewhere. We had to eat outdoors, and we'd have our masks on. And people would be... I almost felt like we were receiving some persecution for that. Like you could see people whispering and like rolling their eyes at... Yeah. I don't know what they thought about it.
Man, that happens in Belton. So
does it?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So either Gulf Shores, Alabama, or Belton, Missouri, it's the same
part of the country.
But being there, I recognized when I was in Alabama that I missed being in a community where people were generally wearing masks when they were out in public. Yeah. And I realized I just like being part of this community. And I think it's because the mask, to me, it's not so much of an individual thing. It's like, I probably won't give anyone the coronavirus. You probably aren't going to give someone the coronavirus, at least right now, today. But we all kind of realize that in order to stop this pandemic, we all have a shared responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of a community that lives in a shared responsibility. And I love being part of a community that kind of owns a shared responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that I have like this deficit in myself where it's like on the one hand we have freedom and our individual rights and I can do what I want to do and nobody can tell me what I can't do. And there's something really good about that. That's a very valuable value of America. But I feel like that is upheld so much and it's kind of beaten to death almost, like nobody tells me what to do. We are individual rights. I can do what I want. That the other side of community, which is shared responsibility, sacrificing for the good of all, it's like that's just not part of our common dialogue. Yeah, it's not part of our public square dialogue, or at least it hasn't been until recently. Yeah. And I recognize that I've been missing it. I want that. I crave it. And it's like, I love wearing my mask. And I love to be around people wearing masks. It's like we're all saying, hey, we're part of a community. And it's not just about me. It's about us. Yeah. Shared responsibility. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. And I think don't you think people are probably hungry for that underneath the rhetoric and underneath the, just repetition of bumper sticker phrases and silly cable news arguments? I mean, don't we all want to protect one another and I just think of like the community of God's people in the Bible. It's one of the first records of a community in history who puts limits on individual freedom, even individual wealth, in order to care for one another in community. Yeah. And that was really unheard of, but I also think that narrative reflects God's heart for what he wants for all humans in community. It's to live in this Jesus way of like laying down one's liberty or restraining one's wealth I don't have to do everything that I have the right to do if I can help somebody else.
Yeah, and usually what you just said is like the equivalent of a dirty word in our culture. Like you won't find politicians using that as a platform usually. No. Like let's lay down our individual liberties for.
Well, it very quickly gets swept into dirty words, Marxism and socialism and those kinds of things, which all go awry for reasons other than those pieces of it. Right. Right. What we're talking about is Christian community. Yeah. Where there is quite a bit of self-limiting and self-emptying for the good of the other.
Yeah, and but it's kind of cool that we're living in our moment in history that's being kind of uncovered and rediscovered, and it seems like there are parts of the country that uncover it quicker than others, but it's not a bad thing to live with a shared responsibility, and then when I stop and think about it, Rustin, I think that as much as I dislike things like the speed limit, I think speed limits and stop signs are also tapping into a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that it's not just about you.
Yeah.
See, so when I drive, it's just about me.
Yeah.
But that's my problem, because it's not ever really just about me. It's about it's always about us. And if you think about, laws are always about us.
Yeah.
About what we experience together.
And see, it's not just your problem; it's our problem.
Yeah.
That you have a problem.
I think I followed that.
Right,
yeah.
because if you go around not stopping at stop signs,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. If you're like, in Troy, Kansas, where I'm from, and you're out in the country and there's a stop sign, you kind of laugh at it, like, why is there a stop sign out here in the middle of nowhere? I can see, down the road, nobody's coming. I'm not stopping at that stop sign. But if you make a habit of not stopping at stop signs, at some point you're likely to roll through a stop sign and hit a kid on a bike or
Right.
something like that.
Right. All laws inevitably are about living together
Yeah.
and living in or they're asking us to sacrifice
Yeah,
some kind of individual freedom
that's right.
for a shared responsibility, a mutual
Yeah.
respect, and a moral value of life and of respecting other people.
Yeah, and I think that's it's fun that the word sign, you think of stop sign.
Yeah.
So the word sign is the root word for signify.
And see, that's important. I feel like we should write that down. We can't
Yeah.
do that, but just
Yeah.
imagine in your head the word signify.
SIGN.
Yeah, it has the word sign in it. Yeah. Mhm.
Signify. So
Signify.
a sign signifies. It signifies.
Yeah.
It points to something beyond itself.
Right.
Right. So a stop sign, just on a very flat level, just means what it says. Stop. And stop here. Stop before you proceed. That's on one level. But the signifying part of the stop sign is if you disobey the stop sign, you're likely to get into an accident because people are maybe not stopping the other direction, or you may hit someone.
Yeah.
So that's the second level. But then there's even a deeper level, which I think you're pointing at,
Yeah.
which is the stop sign signifies a value.
A value. Yeah.
And that value is human life,
Yeah.
the value of one another. That's why we put speed limits up, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a safe speed at which, relatively safe speed at which we can travel. And if you go beyond that, you might be able to do it safely, but statistically, more often there may be bad consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. So signify. And that is this whole conversation about law,
Yeah, it is.
right?
So maybe can I read from Matthew 5?
Yeah.
This passage?
This is where it goes, yeah.
So
We've
with
just,
that,
we've just left the Beatitudes,
yeah.
and this is Jesus doing this parenthetical thing, like, let me anticipate your objections and step back and tell you about what I'm going to do.
I did not come to, but
Yeah.
with this in mind of what the law is,
Mm.
the law is something that signifies
Yes.
a moral. A
Yeah.
moral that respects one another,
Yeah.
and a moral that respects life and
Yes.
dignity.
Yeah.
And so that's what the law is. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And here we are in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 17, we read, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets." Again, Jesus is going to be the biggest fan of what we just got through talking about. Something that, right?
Yeah. I didn't come to tear down all the stop signs.
I didn't
It's
come to
what
tear,
he's-
don't think I came to tear down the stop signs.
Right.
Don't think that I came to do that. I did not come to tell you to stop wearing masks. We
Right.
could go on and on with this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I did not come to tell you not to drive 55, although I can't see Jesus being cool at 55. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Okay, so for truly I tell you, and if you want to interrupt me at any point,
let's
do.
go.
But for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And then maybe the boldest sentence of all of this, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." So how do we tackle that?
Well, there's a bit of a grenade there at the end, but also at the beginning. And I think just in general, I want to observe what great lengths Jesus goes to here to maybe put his interlocutors at ease, those who are going to object to what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
He's like over and over emphasizing his own relationship to the law, and he is all about it, right? He doesn't want any part of it. In fact, you're going to be blessed if you're somebody who upholds these laws, right? So he's fallen over himself here to say you don't have this on me because I'm for the law, right? But maybe a way to start into this is to do it backwards and to begin with this thing he says in verse 20. I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven.
So if you're one of his audience, take me through real quick, Rustin, what you might be feeling right now, because you started with the Beatitudes, and now you've worked up to this point. Where is he taking you?
And again, and the Beatitudes started out with this very comforting message, right? That basically you don't have to be super spiritual. You don't have to have it all together. In fact, if you suffer and if you're in poverty, you're still included in God's good care and his kingdom, and actually everything is going to be yours.
Yeah,
right?
and you're blessed.
That you're blessed. Now, he is saying, if you want that kingdom, you're going to have to outdo the Pharisees in righteousness. And so my imagination is these people who've just been kind of buoyed up by these words of encouragement and acceptance and comfort are now like crestfallen, and right?
Like, it sounds so.
Well, wait a minute. I thought we were in, and now you're telling us we have to be better than Pharisees?
Yeah, because people might realize. The Pharisees were. They were the superheroes of their faith, right? They were the superheroes of the law. They were the Bible scholars. Whoever it is that you think of when you think of that person that knows everything, is so wise. Whether it's N.T. Wright or the antithesis John Piper, or whether it's whoever it is, whoever in your imagination is
Mother
that person.
Teresa, or
Mother
Billy
Teresa,
Graham, or
Billy Graham is a great. Unless your righteousness is better, how does that make you feel?
That's probably how it would have sounded to them. And so I think it's worth saying about the Pharisees too, that we have a negative association with them because of how they played with Jesus during that particular time in history. And so a couple things I'd like to say about it. One is that not all Pharisees were negative combatants to Jesus.
Are you
right?
sure?
There were some good ones listed in.
They didn't dress in black. And
right.
Walk around scowling.
There was a certain strain in that moment in history, and the reason I bring that up is because we live under the shadow of, we live in a difficult political moment where anti-Semitism is it's always under the surface and always in danger of rearing its head, and we want to be really clear that people have used this biblical language against particular Pharisees or group of Pharisees to do some and think awful things against Jews in general, and of course that just needs to be completely dismissed over and over again. Apparently, Jesus himself is a Jew. The Pharisees were generally really good people, right? Who followed the law, who took their faith seriously. People in those days would have walked around thinking of a Pharisee the way that we just mentioned, like some of those heroes, like N.T. Wright or Mother Teresa. They would be like, man, those are people I want to be like. Like, I wish my spiritual life was as rich as what they demonstrate. That's how they would have seen the Pharisees.
They would have. I think there was a fair amount of them that may have thought, I never can, though. Certainly. This might simplify it, and sorry if I'm getting you off course, but I've used this analogy before at Beggar's Table. I sometimes picture the Sermon on the Mount being delivered to like the loser table in a high school. You got all the popular kids and the jocks and the cheerleaders over here, but then you've got the kids that don't fit in just kind of on this table. And it's like if somebody walked into that cafeteria and told the loser table, hey, you belong here. But then if they this might break down here, but if they said, hey, listen, but you're going to have to actually be cooler than that football.
Right.
They're just like, how can I ever be?
There's at least a wrinkle of that. That's true because the Pharisees would have been the cool kids, spiritually speaking.
Exactly.
They'd have been the insiders, the ones with power. And I always like to think of them as kind of a cross between kind of a like the Amish. Like in some ways they had kind of frozen history and said, this is the way that you do this always. And so they refused to be Hellenized and go along with the changing culture. They were kind of stuck in their way. So a bit like we would think of those 19th century groups like the Amish or the Mennonites
or the evangelical church in a lot of places. Yeah.
Easy now.
Okay. Yeah.
So a cross between that,
yeah,
between evangelicals of the 1950s and like a political lobby group, like evangelicals of the 1950s. Sorry.
Yeah.
Now we're in the weeds. But that's the Pharisees. So deeply influential, deeply stuck in an ideology, and definitely the cool kids table when it came to spiritual things.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that enough about the Pharisees? I just think it's important to know what we're talking about when Jesus says you got to be more righteous than that.
It's enough about the Pharisees, and it's significant to say about the about how that makes people feel who hear it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, it's a power statement.
Yeah.
It's a punch in the gut. It can feel like a punch in the gut.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So you want to work backwards from there.
Okay, so that's where people are. They're just thinking, man, I'm in trouble if now I've got to be more righteous than the Pharisees, and people know that they can't do that, or at least in their imagination. But this is where Jesus is going with this language about the law, that he says, I've not come to, what's his language? To abolish the law. I've come to fulfill the law. That's an important word. To fulfill, to fill to the full the law. Now, here's what he's getting at. He's not coming to take down a stop sign. He's coming to help people understand and live out of why there is a stop sign in the first place.
That's well said.
Is that good?
Yeah.
You can go around stopping at every stop sign and still be an utterly contemptible person who hates your neighbor.
The only reason you're doing it is so you don't get a ticket.
Maybe so.
Right.
Yeah. Or to feel self-righteous, or to
feel self-righteous.
Yeah. Jesus is coming, though, to do something deeper than that. So his category is not law versus no law. His category is law, because law reflects reality. But what's underneath that? What is it that makes you the kind of person who naturally follows this way of living in reality? Like, what kind of person naturally, joyfully sits at a red light, patiently, knowing there's no traffic coming, but this light is red, and I'm just happy to be here, just happy to sit at this red light? Well, the kind of person who could do that, I'm only speculating because it's not me.
I know.
Would be a person who had in their mind constantly the joy of shared responsibility, living in a culture, a society together.
Yeah, right.
Like this stop sign, the stoplight represents my attachment to my neighbor and how I keep people safe.
Yeah. I like using the mask more than because saying at a stop sign joyfully, a stoplight, it's like too much.
Yeah. Well, wearing a mask too long feels like too much, right?
It is true. But yeah, so I mean, this is a way of saying that Jesus is getting to the heart of us, and cares more about our heart than our just outward conformity.
Yeah.
Again, it's not binary. It's not either or. It doesn't mean that It doesn't mean that conformity to good laws is a bad thing either. But it's our heart that matters.
That's right. I want even people who don't respect human life to still stop at stop signs.
Yeah. Right. We need them to.
What I'd like more than that is that we all became the kind of people who actually cared for one another.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Alabama was a great example of that. I didn't care about everyone's heart when I was out. Yeah. I wanted everyone to wear their mask. Yeah. That would have made me feel safer.
Yeah.
But ideally, I would like to see all their hearts change so that they all wanted to. Yeah. That would have been the community I want to be a part of.
That's right. Yeah. That's well said. Mm-hmm. That's the community we do want to be a part of. Yeah. And hopefully the communities that we're cultivating in the church.
I think I like what you said, Rustin, about you said something about reality.
Yeah.
It's important for us to remember that when God gave the law to Moses, he wasn't just giving a list of rules.
Yeah.
Although again, I don't want to downplay to a degree. It was rules because God was shaping a people, and they needed rules to live by.
But I think that those have gotten twisted over the years. Like we've talked about this before, that often people come to the Bible with this idea that the Old Testament was all about legalism and the New Testament is all about grace.
Right.
But what I want to say is the Old Testament was all about grace too, because it was always just revealing the heart of God. And so the giving of these rules was an act of grace, right? When you give somebody a mask that can protect and keep somebody alive, or you put up a stop sign to keep somebody from getting run over, let me give you this grace of showing you how to be a neighbor and how to live. All of the Old Testament is grace.
Yeah.
What we have, this is where we confuse it, and we have turned things like the Ten Commandments into this right or wrong, in or out, binary law kind of thing, rule following legalism. I'm not even sure the Pharisees totally did that, and that's just something to be aware of. I think we read that into it a little bit.
Yeah, we might be doing it worse than the Pharisees,
and we got to be careful about it. Yeah.
Which makes sense again because we live in this dualistic culture, but where you're either right or wrong, you're either. But what you said is beautiful, and I think that what God gave Moses was a map of reality in the law. It was a map of this is the way the world swings. This is how reality is set up.
So say that again, because that's a great phrase.
That God gave Moses a map of reality.
A map of reality.
Yeah. So here,
the law is a map. This is how you live in reality.
Here's how you can navigate reality. Yeah. And again, it can't be said enough, especially with one another. It's about how to be with one another.
Yeah. It's kind of where we are with masks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and coronavirus. You can say it's a hoax, or you can say it's the worst thing ever. But eventually, like just the statistics are going to show us what's working and what's not working. Like eventually you run into reality. I remember Dallas Willard saying his definition of reality, reality is what you run into when you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So this given law is a way of saying, follow these things so you don't run into reality.
Right.
Like you're living in grain with the design of things.
Right. They're there to help us to live in green with the design. That's a beautiful phrase.
Yeah.
I think, Rustin, that, and we won't take the time to do this, but I think that if we tease this out, it affects the way that we imagine sin and what sin is. Because this is what sin and the idea of sin is all wrapped up in.
Yeah.
And so so my imagination personally has changed over the years to see sin, to imagine sin as more of unhealth. Something broken, unhealthy, that's not living in green with reality, rather than the breaking of a law, rather than doing something wrong. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah, there's a health. I like the word health, or it's like a quality of life. Like if you live in grain with reality, the quality of your human experience is going to be better. Just think practically. If you go around stealing stuff, one assumes that your life is not going to be better. It might be better short term, but just in generally speaking, a person who habitually steals things is probably going to have bad relationships, may have guilt issues.
Yeah.
Right? You could do that with any of the commandments or laws.
Yeah.
Just say generally,
we're going to
just like we've said with stop signs. If you roll through a stop sign out in the middle of the country, that's probably fine. But if you become the kind of person who doesn't care about other people and then rolls through every stop sign, that's probably not going to go well.
Yeah. It's a hard argument initially to make because it involves sacrificing individual freedoms.
Yeah.
The person who steals and is successful at it is going to get some benefit as an individual. But again, God's reality is designed in a way in which we don't live by ourselves.
Yeah.
No matter what our American doctrine tells us, we don't live in silos. Yeah. Life is structured in a way in which we live with one another, and those relationships, whether it's our relationship with each other or our relationship with God or our relationship with ourselves, it's going to be broken. It's going to be harmed through that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I have to sacrifice individual freedom to wear my mask, but it keeps my relationships healthy, which is how I'm designed to live in a relationship. Yeah.
That's really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like loving your neighbor kind of stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
it does.
That every act that we undertake, the law. Somebody said the law is like training wheels, and how do you know when you don't need training wheels on a bike anymore? It's when they slow you down. When you can ride better without them is when you take the training wheels off. And it's like when you love your neighbor well enough, you don't have to spend a lot of time following, do I have to wear a mask in this business or this business, or how do I follow this rule? You go around respecting human life and your neighbor, and you try to ask, how can I help, and what can I do to serve, and how can I be part of the solution?
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry so much about the law.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Well, I say this is a good place to stop until next time.
Okay.
And we'll get into maybe where Jesus gets more into some pragmatic examples about how we live according in His kingdom in this world and experience a little bit of persecution, and it'll be good. Yeah.
All right. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Rustin.
Thanks, John. Amen.
Amen.